Susan, you want to start us off?
All right. So I'm a Montessori teacher. Every year since 2006, we've been taking children to the UN in New York, where they serve as delegates. And these are fifth graders. These are not high school students. These are fifth graders. They're always scared, and they're always, wanting to see New York and really not go into the UN and do all the work that they have to do. But this year it was virtual. Everybody's on board. So here in Wichita, 7 a.m. in the morning, we start the whole program with 300 children all around the world. And they're at different times of the day, but our kids are dressed and ready to go in their best clothes. They don't see us. We just see them in these committee rooms with 2 adults and an IT person. Every one of these rooms for 300 kids. So you're, watching it for a couple of days, and you're sipping your coffee. Well, 7 a.m. Sunday morning, I'm looking at the screen and there's an IT person only on the screen in one of these committees. And he's talking away, fiddling with things, trying to get the students to come into the chat room from these other rooms. And he's directing them, and they're very patiently saying, yes, we tried that. Yes. And he's talking to the 2 adults, and he's very upset, and he can't seem to get the conference to come together in this one committee room. So he's just about ready to say, let's call it quits. And I can see all these kids going back to bed. He says, let's decide what we're going to do. And one little voice pops up from the group of kids that says, have you tried security? That's usually where the problem is. Sure enough, that was it. Everything's solved. And this is the UN. This is not like, down the street at the Elks Hall. This is the UN. And this one little 5th grader pipes up with the right answer. Save the day.
That's a great story. Thank you. 5th grader to the rescue. We could probably use a few more 5th graders in the UN. That would probably improve things. All right. Thanks for that, Susan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very amusing. Thank you. So I think David is going to join us now. Where are you, David? Are you here? He's going to do a little reading from Man's Eternal Quest. This is a reading he shared at Circle yesterday. A really nice message. So where are you, David?
I'm here.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, this is from Yogananda's book, from Man's Eternal Quest, and he's talking here about success. Happiness is a creation of our own mind, but what is real success? If you attained everything you wanted in this life, you would eventually become disillusioned anyway. By analyzing, I saw for myself that the only pleasure I had in anything was that which my mind gave to it. If I withdrew my attention, enjoyment of any object vanished. Thus I saw that pleasure is internal, a concept of one's own mind. The beauty of your most valued possession, which you may be holding in front of your eyes, disappears when your thoughts are absent from it. Only when you put your mind on it do you perceive its loveliness. Therefore, it is reasonable to say that within us, and not outside us, lies most of the happiness we are seeking. We can magnify our happiness or minimize it. One person has a little home and says, I enjoy it more than a palace. Someone else has a palace in which he does not take as much pleasure as the other person has in his unpretentious cottage. The secret of success and happiness is inside you. If you have found success and prosperity outside, but not inside, you are not truly successful. A millionaire who is not happy is not successful. I don't mean that if you have $1 million, you cannot be a success. Whether you are rich or poor, if you get happiness out of life, you are a real success. Pleasure that lasts only for a moment and leaves you with regret afterward is not happiness. In true success, even though the first excitement of delight in some accomplishment fades away, the gratifying memory of fulfillment remains. All the good things that you have done in your life stay on in your memory as a joy forever. They are the real success that you have attained.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. All right. Well, welcome again, everyone. Glad you could join us today. And we have an exciting thing to share today because a small group of us, we have a little design team, and two of our three architects are here today. And we really want to share where we've gotten so far. And we're really at the very beginning of our planning process, but nevertheless, it's very exciting. And we are starting to produce plans on a regular basis. And we wanted to share that. So Michael and JT or Panduranga, I'm going to do just a short introduction. And because I'd really like to talk about, sort of the core program Polestar part of the plan. And then I'm going to let you guys just chime in and whatever you think is important to share about the plan, how it expresses our values, how it expresses your values. We feel really blessed to have these two and Alex as well working on this project because not only do they have the resonance with our values and care about what we care about, but they have an immense amount of experience designing and building and living in these kinds of places. And so really it's not only a inspirational lead in design, but it's a very practical one as well, which is of course very important. Think of this as even though it looks like a real plan, like a lot of detail, it'd be more useful to think of it as a conceptual plan, which is really more what it is. We have done some amount of specific planning, but this is the beginning of just trying to understand the relationships of different functions and with some detail to go with them because certain things present themselves. I just want to call your attention to the southern edge of this plan, which again, thinking of it as a concept, but just that you have this high density housing, some of it being affordable, probably the bottom floor of which is all designed as age in place friendly. So people could live, seniors could live there, other people could live there too, but it'd be a place that you could, that was designed so elders would function well there. And the quality of life in this kind of a setting where you're basically on foot. You've got the village green and the gardens and the temple and the community center. You can function to a great extent of all the main functions of your life without ever crossing a street even, or worrying about your kids because of cars or, any of those things. So it's it's really like an important part of the heart of the community where we would really hold, a high bar for energy and community. And so, this would be the hub of the community. There could be meals I'll be surprised if there are, many meals per week cooked and ready for everyone to participate in who wants to. And then of course, a sacred space for daily practice and et cetera. So it's really, and then of course you got the gardens right there. You're growing food right adjacent to the dining hall. It's just a wonderful village setting that's designed for pedestrians. And why don't I hand it over to Panduranga? Why don't you share something about the plan that you think is worth people knowing about or are excited about, whatever you like.
Okay. First of all, we really, like Michael was saying, we're trying to create a strong community-centric development, but we still have some of the mundane things we have to deal with, meeting the city and the local governances. And so we have to be able to provide traffic access through the site. So I'm going to start with some of the boring things, but the way West Plum comes in from the east and then turns and goes north to Orchard, that is the primary circulation through the site. And then you'll notice most of the rest of the driveways and parking areas are shorter, like 150-foot limitation. Yes, like that and whatnot. So we can have limited roads. This is about the least amount of roads we could have within the place. But then within that, we've got a whole circulation process of pathways that lead between the different housing areas. If you'll notice on the left, there's a path that goes down through that whole set of housing that leads all the way to the elderly center. But let me back up a little bit and say another thing that was important was to be able to provide different levels of housing for different experiences and people's different position where they are in life. So at the very top, we've got single family housing. All those lavender squares at the top are all single family units. So those are basically lots that could be sold and built relatively easily. And that could also expand down more toward the detention pond there also. Then we're showing basically a series of, they could be townhouses or what we're calling cluster pocket homes, different ways of developing more single family units, but grouped together in small configurations. And what those also provide are places for local community gardens and growing places. You'll see all around the plan, there's little places called PG, which it says permaculture garden, but it's basically a small local garden area. And those are throughout the different housing clusters. Then you'll also notice there's green spaces between groups of housing. For instance, if you look just south of the pond and a little bit to the right, you'll see a big PG there. There's a group of housing, right? There's a group of housing and it all faces onto the green. And those are scattered throughout the development. So there's microclimates, micro communities within the community where people could work together and have, I'm gonna call them local gardens and also local green areas. And within those there's meandering paths that lead down to the more community centers, so you don't have to use the roads. Just to throw something up so people understand, that pond is basically, it's a green space, but it's a detention area for big storm events where water drains into there, then drains away. So it will be green, but it can't be developed for direct use. And we can talk about more about that later, but it's basically about an 8 to 10 foot deep area. So it is a depression within the space, but it will be green. So it'll be somewhat of an asset, but not overly usable.
We can walk through that space. We can have
Right.
trails through it. You could throw a Frisbee on it, and it can be beautiful. But, there's limitations to how much we can use it because it is for storms, and it will be a negotiation with the city on that.
The other thing to talk about a little bit, talk about the hub of the community, where there's one of the hub is around the village green where you have the high density housing, which is the other level of housing. So we have the single family, the more townhouse, duplex, attached housing, and then we have the high density, which is more in that area. And actually above the kitchen area, the community center is residential potentially, and also multi-story elder and other affordable housing. But also in that hub, we see a small commercial zone. You see the piazza there that's kind of off the drive hub? Yes. So those two buildings, we see the ground floor as being small commercial, anything from a small 7-Eleven to, some small offices, practitioners of different sorts. So there would be a little bit of commercial space that would serve the community there. And that's why there's parking behind it. There's also, above it would also be residential housing. So there's a whole cluster there in the center where there's a fair amount of activity, where there's a lot of parking and roads, but that's because that's actually a place that would be accessed more by vehicles. There was also the idea of having a farmer's market weekly or however often would work out, and that would be associated with the village green in the community gardens area. And
just to mention something on that, Panduranga, the kind of a lot of discussion has gone into, because where it says the piazza there, I thought it said plaza, but piazza works. That would be like an architect's office or a massage studio or a yoga studio even, or all kinds of different things downstairs, and upstairs would be residential. And that would be open to the public. But we wanted to make it so that the temple, the community center, and the village green was more open to the community itself, and on occasion could be opened to the public. So we're trying to find that sort of relationship between, private community space and public community space. All right, Michael, you're here somewhere.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Would you like to chime in?
I don't have a lot to add, but let me think of some things we haven't mentioned. At the very south of the property is a beautiful old house with kind of a farmyard, chicken coop around it, and majestic cottonwood trees. And we're trying to not disrupt that in such a way that it would damage its character. And along the southwest kind of left of the property is a ditch and some majestic cottonwood trees. In my experience doing neighborhoods in Colorado, it's very difficult to keep old vegetation because of how kind of brutal subdivision construction is, and the issues around it. But that is the goal, is to keep as many of those, I think, beautiful cottonwood trees. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the new development in this drawing is pulled away from that. Another thing that we had, I had heard from the design team, members that have been working on this in the last month or so, is breaking the neighborhood down into little kind of pocket neighborhoods where there's a group of maybe 8 homes around a small common green with the chance for gardens and vegetable growing and community space common to a small cluster of homes. And there have been different drawings about that. I think one thing that's really important is how the community building and the village center really works well socially and emotionally, and really pulls people together as a heart, and that'll be important in all. And it's easy for all the forces of like parking and roadway design to not tee that up to be choreographed the best way possible, but the team will do their best to make that really important.
Thank you. Just to put a point on that, the standard road that is needed to come through, this is a road that connects a very not busy road with another not busy road. And what they want is basically a 60-foot easement. It's a huge, and that's as drawn where it says West Plum, where the label is West Plum, that I believe is drawn as 60 feet.
yeah, it's got all the, it's got the sidewalks and all the width.
That includes sidewalks and et cetera. And then as it turns and goes up, as West Plum heads north there, we are exploring, at least doing what they call a modification of standard, choking that road down by 8 feet. Because what they found is that skinnier roads are safer. There's less accidents on skinnier roads. People drive slower, they go around each other. There's even schemes where they design 2-way roads with only one car able to fit at a time, and less people die is the reality of it. So, but anyway, fortunately, there is a lot of sort of new urbanism kind of bias in Fort Collins. They are on top of a lot of these concepts that make for more livable communities, and so we do have some hope of tweaking the rules a little bit to get the best possible result. What would the speed limit be in the hood? That's a good question. That's a good question.
I mean, typically on local streets in Colorado, the speed limit's 25 miles an hour. It varies by town, but pretty much every town is 25 miles per hour on local streets.
So you can see that point at where West Plum heads north, and there's sort of a circle, a green circle in the middle. That's a concept we're working on that could include speed bumps, could include a turnaround as drawn, but basically a way to send the message is that there's pedestrians here and they have the first, right of way. So to really make it obvious that people should drive slow through here. So I would hope people wouldn't go around that corner at 25 miles an hour.
Well, and there's one thing, it's hard to see, but if you zoom in, there's actually a lot of places where all the paths cross the road where there's some dashed lines drawn that indicate there will be some traffic control things going on. There's actually quite a few of those. Someone had asked about solar access. Yes, if you can see, almost all the buildings are oriented. North is up, south is down. So we have the buildings oriented so we can have good solar access to virtually all the buildings, and we're not shadowing the buildings, from one to another. So the green spaces between the buildings should have good solar access and good sunlight. We're talking, the majority of the buildings would be 2.5 stories. There might be 3-story buildings in the high density and the commercial and more in that area. As far as charging stations, I assume that's something we would do locally. That's probably going to be required. Michael might know that, but I know everything we're doing here in California now, we have to put charging stations in all the different areas. So I think that's probably going to be required either in the
We had one iteration a while back where we put all the cars and parking lots outside, and every unit came with a little golf cart type thing, which if you haven't seen them lately, they have really amazing little vehicles now, all different types, including, we are told, luggage that will follow you through the airport. So anyway, we did a lot of thinking about how we could just keep the cars out, and basically each unit comes with a golf cart and sort of do it that way. And I don't think that's really won the day yet, but it is a concept that's still being considered how that might work. And certainly you could get around on a little cart in here really well and not own a car. I should mention at the very bottom of the map, that is Dennis and Bailey's house in the not colored in area is their house. And then at the bottom of that, below that, is Elizabeth Street, which runs east-west and is, you can get transit there. And it's a major place to pick up a bus very regularly there and go anywhere in the city. So so you could do well in this community, I think, without a car. And of course, there's always the angle of car co-ops, which is a big thing these days. Apparently they're big in Canada. They have car co-op companies, and it's working out well for them. Everyone thought that this would be the year for the self-driving car, and unfortunately, they were mostly wrong. Because my personal belief is that once we have self-driving cars and everybody makes the switch to that, because, why own three cars, a truck, a scooter, and a family car, just get the car you need when you need it. It's way more efficient for the planet. If you can get it on demand, you wouldn't really need to own it or store it. And I think that'll be a big shift in parking requirements and et cetera, et cetera. And everybody agrees it's coming, but nobody knows when yet. They're getting closer every year for sure.
I'm going to answer some of the questions that came up real quick.
Thank you.
Someone asked about garage. All the single family units, of course, single family units would have garages. Actually, the cluster pocket that's just south of the single family above the pond, those all have potential garages coming off that alleyway. The townhomes to the left, all the ones that are adjacent to that white area, those virtually have parking garages underneath. And so there's a range, everything from garages to not. There's no parking on the street for people residing here. There's parking spaces for all the residences off the street. Someone asked about.
Just to make sure I understand it, Ponderoga, as I understand it, there's parkings on both sides of the West Plum east-west leg of the street.
Right.
And then there would be parking on one side of the north-south leg of West Plum.
Yeah, that's probably what we're thinking about trying to get away with. So we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. So there is parking on both sides of to answer Ron's questions. And you answered the other part. One of the designs Michael Tavel shared with us, and actually I think Alex tripped over it, and Michael knew about it, is some of these designs they've done what they call nesting, and they're just very clever. You'll take a lot like some of the ones we have on the western edge there, and people will like put a unit over their garage for their kid or their college age kid or their grandson or whatever, and they can have an extra unit or two built right into the design of their home. What was really clever about these designs is how well they integrated the growing environment, because they had lots of green and food growing and natural beauty integrated it into very practical but very compact living spaces. So, good question, Bailey. I hope we can transplant them. Bailey says, what happens to all the blue spruce trees, which they planted all those. Those of you who have seen the aerial photos, and that's a really good question. One of the problems you have in a development like this is you have to change the elevations, usually, not insignificantly, and it does make it difficult to keep trees, especially in the middle. It is also a fact that we have a lot of big equipment on the site, and we could very possibly do some transplanting. So, so that would be another workaround, but that's a really good question. It remains to be seen. We don't have a grading plan yet, but basically the typical approach is you've got this pond you're digging 8 feet deep, say, and the normal way you would do it is you would balance the site. So what comes out of there raises the elevation, which of course improves the tendency towards flood in all the buildings, minimizes the flood potential for the buildings. But anyway, remains to be seen. We'll know more about that when we get to the preliminary grading plan, which is not that far away, actually, because this is almost a conceptual design that we can start talking to people about. So
there was a question. I went up to the top and started coming down. Can West Plum be moved to the west edge of the property, keeping all interior paths, walkways as primary paths? There's a potential for that, but when you single load a street like that, in other words, you just access it from one side, then you have to have access for vehicles and for the fire trucks to get in. Every house has to be within 50 feet. 150 feet is the longest road you can have without a fire truck turnaround. And then I believe, at least here, it's 50 feet for a fire truck to be from any house. So you can't just throw a road around the outside and have all the housing without access on the inside of the property. And so if you run it more down the middle, that's why we have those short little roads, going that are dead ends, because you don't have to have a turnaround. As soon as they're longer than that, you have to have a turnaround for fire trucks.
No, and actually, I think we've learned, Panduranga, that they don't even do the turnaround. They want to get out. They'll make you put in an alley, or at least that seemed to be the case in the northern, just north of the pond there, that they were not going to accept a hammerhead turnaround there, that they needed actually to get out. So, but yeah, good question. We've definitely covered that terrain.
Well, if people actually did park, I want to put in a plug for parking out and walking in. That's how they have the co-housing in California, and it seems to work really well. They don't have the golf carts you were talking about, but they have carts that you carry or you push, to your house, and then you see everybody too. So it's a nice way to communicate. They've done studies where you see your neighbors more if you're not driving to your house, and that's an open area to converse.
Oh, that's great. And there would be a certain amount of that here in some of the areas, and a fair amount actually. But no, I love that concept, and I think it's exactly what we're struggling with city requirements, because you can only go so far, and once you, yeah, so. Let's see, another question.
There are neighbors, the east of the property, that's all basically neighborhoods up and down the eastern side, correct?
Yes,
And the western side is more.
big apartment complex to the west, like southwest, and then northwest is another retention pond. So that's kind of nice. There is a little bit of open space there because of the retention pond, and it does improve the view. Yeah, there will be view corridors, but I think generally speaking, less so as you move east in terms of views of the mountains, and more so as you move west. And then, of course, on the east, you got the morning light coming in too, which is always a plus in my book. See what else we got here. How many pickleball courts? Where are they? Yeah, good question. Somewhere on the village green, and could be even, you might have a pickleball cluster somewhere where people are really enthusiastic and want to have that. There needs to be utility distribution building for the farm's needs. Amen to that. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it could be that some of that parking, you see a long line of parking along the southeastern border. It could be that you could put some garages there or other utility buildings as well. And also have solar on them. Also maybe have storage there. And then Supriya, yes to solar panels, and that is why it's been set up this way, because as most of you may know, this is excellent. Colorado is excellent for solar because it's very sunny, and better than where we are here.
This will work good for passive and active solar both.
Exactly.
Final acreage.
Yes, it's about 19 point something acres, 19 and a half acres, basically. Yeah. And part of what would be really helpful, especially for those people who are interested in really giving this a shot, making this your home, investing and participating. Because our best instinct so far is to have a nice diversity of building products. And there's just a lot to recommend it, because we want a diverse community. We want affordable housing. We also want people who really just want their own single family dwelling to have it. And various products in between. But if you know for certain you want this or that, we would like to hear about it, and any other input you might have. Tiny homes. If you mean like tiny homes and wheels, not necessarily, but we are looking at micro housing as a way to keep costs down. And when you've got pretty compact living space, private living space, but you can walk outside. I think we need the IT department. Where's that fifth grader?
It's good now.
Okay, more better. Okay, alternative housing, cob, domes, yurts, teepees. Oh boy. Good question. We haven't thought a lot about that. Yurts and teepees would not be permitted here. You have to realize that we're in a city. This is not, 20 acres in the boonies of, rural area somewhere. So, anything that is done has to be done, properly and to code, and will be inspected. I think the main alternative housing we have in front of us right now is we are looking at, there's a friend of ours who's developing bamboo lumber. And so he's doing engineered lumber, and actually a really, really great guy. He's had, you can check out his company, bambooliving.com, if you want to check it out. But I built several of these bamboo houses. They're the only code approved structural bamboo house in the world. And he spent 10 years crushing and burning bamboo to get it through the approvals. And it's amazing house kind of thing. But his next project is they bought a huge acreage in the Philippines with a bunch of bamboo, and they are in the process of creating a building system around it where they actually make plywoods and they make structural lumber and et cetera, all out of bamboo. And so anyway, that is sort of in the back of our mind, because their target for products is about when we're going to start building here. We'll see if it works out, but otherwise, we haven't seen, we don't have a real obvious alternative method. We are looking at modular housing, which are, components that are built off-site and delivered to the site. And, if you follow that industry, they get a larger market share every single year. And, it's inevitable in my mind that that's where it's going to end up. You know, we've seen videos with two big arms, each with 6 nail guns, you know, moving down hundreds of feet of wall, nailing off the plot. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And so anyway, we are looking into that. At least modular components. There's a certain amount of logic to modular building, and it maybe hasn't quite arrived yet, but I think it is coming. So it'll probably be part of our future. When do you plan to start building? We're a couple of years from building anything. And, you know, one thing to realize about this plan is that the best plans really evolve. You know, you learn from everything you do, and you continually improve everything you do. And unfortunately, our you know, permittal process doesn't include that to a great extent, inhibits that to a great extent, in fact. However, you know, we're hoping there will be people who might buy a lot or two or more and hold on to it as an investment. And you know, it might be that we don't have to build it all at once. There's, you know, that high density housing on the Village Green. We could start with we will start with one of those. We hope to get a bunch of us there living in relatively compact units, and using one of those apartments as the interim common spaces. So having a place to meditate there, having a kitchen we can all share in there, and that'll get all the components sort of working right away of how we want to live together. And then we evolve. You know, we just, who knows what will really get built. It's a complex equation, you know. And you know, the reality is some of us may not be around when it all gets built. You know, it's going to evolve beyond us. So
one thing I would like people to understand, Michael said at the beginning that this looks like a real defined plan, but it's really a diagram. And it's important as a diagram to look at circulation and how things move throughout the site. But if you zoomed into just like one of the clusters that's got green space between it, and you look at the housing, there's many ways that those small micro community parts could be designed and worked out to meet people's needs, especially if a small group of people got together. Let's say 6 people got together and bought 6 townhouses that all open onto a singular green. There could be a micro community there where you do something completely different than somewhere over on the other side where people might want something else. So that's why it's important to understand some of this is moving in a direction that we're going to need to deal with for utilities and whatnot on the site, but there's a lot of micro designing that can really make things very personable and personal throughout the site.
very good, thank you. How about a big flower garden? Absolutely. I'm sure there's a lot of flowers growing there right now, and there's a lot of space for it, and that'd be a great business for somebody too, or just a great community asset. And art studio as well. I think you know, in a community you need common spaces for different functions, and you know, the dining hall is just a box on the green at this moment, but you know, it could have spaces like that upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
It could have guests facilities. The downstairs of the high density housing could have more common spaces or classroom space or art space, all kinds of possibilities there. So. Yeah, one thing I want to just close with is just thank everybody for being here. We're going to take a little break from these weekly meetings. Our next meeting, which is not scheduled yet, it's possible that it'll be at this time, at same time actually, but we're trying to get all those folks who are either in Fort Collins or planning on moving there this summer, and there's a little group of us planning. So if you're in that group and want to join us, stay tuned. We'll put a notice out about it, and so you're welcome to join us. But we got a lot of practical things to talk about, and we're looking at places to land over there and all that. So that'll be the next meeting. And then I think what we're going to go to is just once a month, we'll have a meeting like this to check in, see how the plans are going and the process is going and the progress, and just sort of keep in touch that way. So with that, I will hand it over to Susan, and who's going to close with a chant. Thank you. Thank you.
We're here. So we are here in Fort Collins, very close to that property that you all will be coming and maybe being our new neighbors. That'd be great. We're looking forward to more Kirtan people. Give me a thumbs up if that sound is okay. Is that sound level all right? Thank you. Start.